I'm Gabi and I'm a wet and wet oil painter, and today I'm going to do something I've been meaning to do for a long time. So I have not done this since I started oil painting. And what this project is I'm going to attempt to paint a sort of Bob Ross style picture with acrylic paint. And I am terrible at painting with acrylics. That's why I started with oils. The very first oil painting I ever did sucked, but it was way better than anything I'd ever painted before. And so I decided, and I've had this on the dock for a long time, but I decided that I was going to attempt to paint a picture with acrylic paint. Now, a bit about the paint that I'm going to use. I'm going to use a whole bunch of junk paint that I have sitting in a big turkey pan that I keep in a thing in our kitchen. Long story. And so I'm going to try to use that stuff and try to come up with something sort of salvageable out of acrylic. So I'm going to bring you guys over to the canvas that I'm going to use. So let's go over there. Now, instead of using my normal flat palette for my paint, because acrylic is sort of soupy, I'm going to use one of these guys. And I think I'm going to paint probably a beach scene because I'm good at beaches. I might try to do a little cabin in it. So we'll just see where it goes. Okay, so I've got my spread of paint. I have all these sort of random weird, holy cow, that's running down the palette. Anyways, I got all these random colors. I have like a cobalt blue, yellow ochre, I think that's supposed to be like an umber or some type of brown, some type of blue that's running all over the place, viridian, yellow, kind of a vermilion, reddy, orangey, what we call that, burnt sienna, some red, black, light blue, and white, and so that's what I sort of have, and I'm sort of trying to decide what I'm going to do on my canvas. So I have this nice little canvas because I didn't want to waste a big one, and I thought about maybe laying down some like liquid white as a base, but I don't know. So I have some water. I've toyed with the idea of doing some like like paint and wine type of classes, and in order to do that I'm gonna have to sort of figure out how to paint with acrylic. I could do it with oil, but that's expensive, and stuff doesn't dry and it just causes all sorts of problems, and I don't like people touching my oil paint, and I have all sorts of hang-ups about stupid things like that. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that with oil. I might do like a bigger class just with oil in general, but we'll see eventually. Okay, so what I decided to do is just put a little water onto this canvas first. And this is just like a Dollar Tree 8x12 or 8x10, or I think it's 8x12 canvas. No, it's 8x10, take that back, because 4 of these will make one of my regular 16x20s. And I think I'm going to do just a really sort of generic sunset watery sort of picture. So we'll start with the sunlight up here. Now keep in mind, acrylic is not my forte whatsoever, and I have to sort of keep in mind that acrylic doesn't work like oil does. So I always tell people, because I get this question all the time, because I do a lot of like live painting and interacting with the people, the masses as I paint. I get this question all the time. What's the difference between oil and acrylic? Or I didn't know there was a difference between oil and acrylic. I hear that a lot too. And so my sort of explanation there is this. Painting with acrylic is a bit like painting with Hershey's syrup. It's sort of runny, it dries fast, and imagine trying to frost a cake with Hershey's syrup. Now, let's imagine that oil paint is like cake frosting. So acrylic, Hershey's syrup, oil, paint frosting. So that's kind of the difference I see. Oil paint is thick, it's malleable, it is, you can dilute it to like lots of different sort of states, where acrylic paint is basically liquidy and wet, or it's dry. So I'm going to try to sort of manipulate this paint as much as I can while it's still wet, and then just sort of play around with it. I have watched some people do some acrylic painting, and one thing that I have learned in that process is that you sort of strike when the iron is hot. That is sort of how you paint with acrylic. And what I mean by that is, you know, when it's wet, work with it, and then it's okay to let it dry and then sort of layer over the top of it. You just have to kind of bend to its whims. And the nice thing, in my opinion, about oil is it's not so much that way. I cringe as I use some of my paintbrushes to do this, but I can and will wash them as soon as I'm done with this project. Let's see. Grab another paintbrush, and I'm going to take some blue. Oh, that blue's terrible. Some of the stuff that I grabbed, I think, is from like one of the kids' paint by number sets. So it's like, yeah, it's really something. And I just decided I want to put some clouds or something in here, kind of over the top. One thing I really hate about easels is these little lips, because I like to really get to the edges of stuff. So I usually use these pegs on my French easel a lot of times, but in this sort of occasion, I just kind of have to deal with what I have and go with it. I wonder if I can find a different blue to use, because this blue is, I found some thicker stuff. One thing about painting with acrylic that I've had issues with for a long time is I've since I've been an adult, I haven't went and spent money on like good acrylics. But I did use good acrylics in high school, and I was okay with them, but not super successful because, again, they dry really fast. So maybe like as a grown-up, I could try a little bit better acrylics. But that's something that I just have never really done as an adult. There's always been better things to spend money on. And now that I can oil paint, I prefer to do that. Just a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of a cloud down here. If any of you ever make it to Florida and you go to a beach, you're looking for a beach, say on the ocean side, so on the East Coast, one of my favorite beaches to go to is Cocoa Beach. And I love it because the waves there are just really big, and they are a lot of fun to swim in. A little bit dangerous, but a lot of fun. So we go to Cocoa Beach a lot. And when I went to Cocoa Beach, I met this very cool guy that I really like, that I seem to have a lot in common with, and his name is Jeff. And Jeff goes to Cocoa Beach on the daily, and he sits down there and he paints under a little umbrella, and he sells his pieces and, you know, jams out to his kind of punk rock music, and he's great. So if you guys ever make it to Cocoa Beach, go to the gentleman. You'll see him painting on the beach. He's usually there in the mornings up until about noon or 1 o'clock, and then I think he usually kind of hightails it out of there. But yeah, if you ever get a chance, go there and chat with him. Very nice guy. And tell him that some artist that he met on the beach that comes and visits with him sent you to say hi. Really, really nice guy. And watching him, I've sort of picked up a couple little tips when it comes to painting. And he paints with the cheapest acrylic he can find, which is great because what he can do with that stuff is very, very impressive. That was kind of my point in that roundabout, long-winded discussion I had. But like watching him paint, and it's like he's out there in the sun, and so that stuff's drying really fast, and he just keeps on sort of layering over the top. So it's really cool. It's really cool to watch him paint. I almost feel like it would be easier to learn how to paint with oil and then go back to acrylic, because oil is just so forgiving, and it's like it's just so much easier to use. And I feel like if you have a good teacher, or if you're good at learning stuff, you know, like following along and learning stuff, you can master oil a lot easier than you can master acrylic. I painted a ton in high school, but one thing that my art teachers were always really good at was giving us supplies and being like, okay, go. and not sitting down with us and being like, okay, today we're doing a lesson specifically on how to use fan brushes, and today we're doing a lesson on exactly how to layer colors, and you know what I mean? So I think if we would have had more direction and more of a like, okay, we're gonna sit down, this is what we're gonna paint, and I'm gonna talk you guys through it, I think I might have been more successful. But of course I didn't have that, so that's the way life goes. All right, I'm gonna take some of this. I'm like, keep on trying to wash off these brushes because acrylic dries so fast. And I live where it's cold, and so like right now, if you can hear sort of a sound in the background, that's actually my heater running because it gets cold in my sewing room. We have sort of a basement that is, it's not really a basement, it's more of a walkout. And during the summertime, it's always nice and cool down here, but during the winter, it's always cool as well, which is not cool because I don't like the cold. Ask me why I live in Minnesota. Okay, so let's see if we can bring in some of this blue. This blue is like super thin and liquidy. You'd think like the more liquidy it is, the longer it would take to dry, but it's like exactly opposite of that. It's kind of funny. Across a little bit. And it's funny, like what I'm seeing on camera versus what I'm seeing as I'm looking at this in person is like I'm seeing a lot more blue in person, where on camera it looks really, really light colored. All right, now let's see if we can make ourselves a wave. Got a wave right in the middle of the picture, I think. I hear people always talk about like layering oil paint, but you definitely have to layer acrylic too if you want to get any sort of anything out of it, I think. So far it's going better than planned, I think. And I'll take some black. I like to start my beachy stuff along the water off with, you know, black or really, really dark brown. Because then I can use sort of the white of the canvas to create the sand without having to do a whole lot of work. Sand is really good at sort of painting itself. Whether I'm painting on dark or on light, sand was one of my biggest intimidations, and now I find it to be like one of the easiest things that I paint. It was just a matter of taking the step and actually trying to do it. Alright, that's going good so far. I'm going to go through a whole roll of paper towels trying to do this. Let's just see here. My husband has this work thing that I have to go to, and he's like, oh, you should, you know, like it's like a weekend thing. He's like, you should do a thing where you like do a class or something. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have to learn how to paint with acrylic before I can ever do that, because there's no way I can send, you know, 20, 30 people home with wet oil paintings. It just isn't going to happen. All right, let's see if we can take some white here. I knew that these little plastic palette things I got would come in handy someday. Give that a little chance to dry. One thing that I've noticed with acrylic paintings is you don't tend to get the depth with it that you tend to get with oil. Some people can do it, but it's more often than not I see it where it's like, it's just hard to get that depth. To me, a great acrylic painting is one where I look at it and I'm like, okay, is that acrylic, or like what were they using to paint that? To me, that is like, if you are an acrylic painter and you can get to that level where people look at it and they don't know what kind of paint you're painting with, then you have really done something right. Okay, let's see. Suppose I will grab a mop. Grab one of my cheap mops. I don't want to use my good mop brushes to do this because I do not want to wreck my mop brushes. I have a ton of mop brushes, and I am sort of very careful with them because they wear out fairly easily, and like the concept of putting acrylic paint on them makes me cringe. So far, guys, I think we're not completely butchering it, which is fun. I think I'm gonna leave my beach at that, at least for now. I think I'll put in a couple palm trees. Good news is I can paint a palm tree in my sleep, so this should be something I can master. I'm just hoping I don't have to use my good fan brush to attempt to do this, because I don't really want acrylic paint in my fan brush. Water in this, and I'm going to attempt to do this with my flat brush, but we'll see. The trick to painting palm trees, and I did a video on it, but it's really about getting the practice of feathering your brush off of the canvas, so you, as you start, you're pushing harder, and then you sort of lift as you come off. Well, that sort of looks like a palm tree. That's fun. I think maybe we'll give ourselves another palm tree. I'm going to give myself a little bit of ground to be running on, though, so that I can sort of create some depth in between my palm trees. Maybe for the fun of it, I'll do one here too. And palm trees are almost never straight, especially natural palm trees. They tend to kind of grow any direction that they possibly can. Trees kind of getting away from me, but we'll make it happen. Try to make these leaves a little bit bigger than my other palm tree. If you've never had the opportunity to spend time in the tropics, or, you know, basically see palm trees in real life, because there's a lot of us who haven't, one thing you might be surprised to learn is that there's actually lots of different palm trees, and they look different depending on what type of leaves they have, what kind of tree they are. So if you ever get a chance to see them in person, don't be surprised when you're like, oh, they don't all look exactly the same, because they don't. I don't know if I love how this trunk is going, but create a little bit more depth in there. Oh, I wanted to try to paint a little hut on my beach too, I think. Or maybe not a hut. Maybe we'll just do like a little umbrella in the sand. A little chair on the beach. Maybe 2 chairs. We'll put one over on this side. There we go. And I think I'm going to put one more little thing in this picture, and then I think we're actually going to be done. Let me be the first person to say animals are not my thing. But little birds out in the sunset are actually fairly easy to do. No different than we would have done back in kindergarten. There we go, we have some tiny birds. And guys, that's it. I have painted me an acrylic picture, and you guys are whoever sees this, you are the first people to see me paint with acrylics since I started painting with oil over 2 years ago. I still like my oil better. I am not going to give it up for acrylic ever. But painting this little picture gives me a little bit of hope that I might be able to figure out how to do maybe some little wine painting classes without having to sacrifice my oil. Now the trick will be if I can figure out how to translate painting this from me painting it into helping other people paint. You know, because that's sort of the goal of those painting classes, is to, you know, help people paint pictures when they're not, you know, painters or anything near painters. There, we give a little highlight to our trees too. I think that's going to be about it. I think I'll give a little bit of lines in here to the water, just give the water a little bit. Sometimes my big crashing waves end up being really, really big, especially since I like to end up putting more depth into the front of my pictures, but that's it, guys. If you guys have any questions or comments, put them in the comment section of the video. I'm Gabby. Thank you so much for watching. Check out some of my other videos that I've done. I've been doing interviews of other wet on wet oil painters, just getting started on that, and that's been a blast, so check those out. And then I guess until next time, even though this is acrylic and not oil, I really do hope that you guys fall in love with oil painting just as much as I have. Bye, guys.